Hello and welcome back to Arsenal Analysed. I'm JC. I hope you're doing well. Today I bring you yet another match preview, and what a game we have in store this Saturday evening. Newcastle versus Arsenal at St James's Park, a place that Newcastle have made an absolute fortress of late. The atmosphere is always rocking, a very, very tough place to go. But in this video, I plan to bring you all the stats, facts, team news, literally everything that you need to know before kickoff. So if you are looking forward to today's video, do go ahead and smash that like button. Subscribe if you're new around here. I'm not too far from 2,400 subscribers, and your help would be greatly appreciated. But let's waste no more time at all and dive straight into things, shall we? Kicking off with the recent form of both sides, we can see on screen here Arsenal coming off the back of a subpar performance and defeat at the hands of West Ham in midweek, a loss in the Carabao Cup, knocked out, no longer part of that competition. Arteta did heavily rotate, have the Arsenal players, those fringe players looking to make a headache or a case for Mikel Arteta. Maybe they've made that decision just a tad easier for him. Thankfully, it wasn't a full strength first team, so hopefully morale and confidence hasn't been bashed too much. But if we have a look at the results prior to that, Arsenal, last Premier League game, a really, really convincing, dominant display against Sheffield United, and also a win in the Champions League as well. A very kind of mixed bag of performances. But Arsenal, I wouldn't say that loss is going to massively affect them. Newcastle, on the other hand, have come off the back of a win against Manchester United. And I know they're not in great form at the moment, but in terms of confidence, it's always going to do you the world of good when you beat Manchester United at Old Trafford, whether it's the Premier League, Carabao Cup, the FA Cup. So Newcastle, they'll be in high confidence, no doubt. Prior to that, Newcastle seem to have hit a little bit of form of late. They're not that rubbish team, for lack of better words, they were at the start of the season. They're starting to pick up a few results, and they did somewhat shock Newcastle with that 2-2 draw. And then earlier on last week, they lost to Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League. So very similar to Arsenal in the sense there's been a sort of mixed bag of results. But when it comes to the Premier League, they're in some very, very fine form. They started the Premier League a little bit rough, but they're really starting to pick up some form now. And as already mentioned, their home record is absolutely outstanding. And we can see here on the right-hand side as well that Callum Wilson is their top goal scorer at the moment in the Premier League, with 7 goals in 9 matches. Eddie Nketiah, 5 in 10, both of which I expect to start this game ahead of the fixture on Saturday evening. But what does the head-to-head record look like between these two clubs? If we just scroll up a little bit here on FootMob, we can see that there's been a fair few fixtures in recent history. These two clubs have obviously met way more than 26 times down the years. But in recent history, Arsenal do trump Newcastle in this department with 20 wins compared to their 3 of which ending in a draw. But one thing that we have to do, sort of take into consideration when we're looking at the recent history between these two clubs and the fixtures, is that obviously Newcastle's fortunes have turned of late, and all of their victories against Arsenal have actually come at St James's Park. There's the one more notable victory that they had a season or two back, where they effectively stopped Arsenal from gaining Champions League qualification right at the back end of the season. And it's a tough place to go, so we do have to take that into consideration. A lot of those Arsenal wins have either come at home, or it was prior to them being this kind of new beast that they are to date. So I am anticipating a very, very tough game between these two sides. And personally, I wouldn't read too much into the fact that Arsenal have won 20 of the 26 more recent histories, especially with the majority of those coming at home. But what can we expect in terms of injury news, team news? Who's going to be available for Arsenal? Who's going to be available for Newcastle United? There are a fair few updates for both clubs. Different updates, of course, Arsenal always in the physio room, unfortunately. But if we have a quick look here, no real serious updates, if you will, on Thomas Partey. We know that there was yet another setback for him with a muscular injury a few weeks ago when we expected him to return after international duty. He featured on the Arsenal bench during that Man City game. And since then, he's picked up a muscular injury, which has kept him out for a few weeks. Although on here, it says that there's a potential return date of the 25th of November. It could well be that he doesn't return until after the next international break. And Gabriel Jesus, who we know also picked up a little knock recently in the Champions League. He gave an interview after the game suggesting that it's not that serious. Mikel Arteta erring on the side of caution, suggesting that he wants to wait and see what the assessment looks like, have some scans before really kind of delving into whether or not it's going to be a serious injury. But he's also said that in the past, he's given a date and a timeline, and Gabriel Jesus has come back much, much sooner. So again, one to keep an eye on. It suggests here that he won't return until around about the 25th of November, which is right at the very end of this month. Hopefully he returns sooner, because it did look like he was hitting some fine form just before getting injured again. It always seems to be the story with Gabriel Jesus. And I suppose in a kind of positive way, Eddie Nketiah looks like he might have picked up some form at exactly the right time. More bad news for Arsenal, unfortunately. Emil Smith-Rowe, who looked like he was starting to pick up a few more minutes, a few more starts in those cup competitions as well, picked up another injury. And it seems to be a very, very sort of familiar story with a number of Arsenal players, and not so much Gabriel Jesus, but when it comes to the likes of Thomas Partey and Emil Smith-Rowe, they're often rumoured with exits from the club, and it might be due to a lack of minutes, or maybe due to them being on the injury table all the time. And this certainly isn't going to help. Another one that is rumoured to be returning to the Arsenal squad the 25th of November. Hopefully, again, that's kind of erring on the side of caution, but really gutted for him, because he did look like he was starting to pick up some of those substitute appearances, working his way into the side slowly, especially into that midfield where Arsenal seem to be toing and froing with who to play in that number 8 role. That area that has been vacated by Granit Xhaka, Arteta doesn't seem to have kind of really nailed down who his preferred starter is in that position. And he hasn't had the luxury of a full kind of selection in that particular area throughout the season. It always seems as though there's one or two players that aren't available. And then we've got Yuri and Timber, of course, who is still out until probably the early to mid part of next year. Looking at Newcastle's unavailable players, music to a lot of Arsenal fans' ears for probably a lot of the wrong reasons. Sandro Tonali is out, banned due to betting. Hopefully he gets the support and help that he needs. But obviously an integral part of what Newcastle have done. A huge, huge miss for them. Massive plus for Arsenal, of course. And he will be out for around about 10 months. Harvey Barnes is another one who was, again, very similarly to Emil Smith-Rowe, a player that they signed this season, in the sense of being similar to Smith-Rowe in terms of him recently having worked his way into the side, being kept out by Anthony Gordon, who's in some great form this season. He is going to be out until the early part of next year with a foot injury. Jacob Murphy also out until 2024. And then we've got a couple of other players here which won't feature, which again, you'd imagine would be part of that starting lineup should they be fit. We've got Elliot Anderson, maybe not so much him. He's out until the back end of the year. Sven Botman would certainly feature. Alexander Isak would most certainly feature. Fabian Schär, was out with a illness. I do expect him to return. We've got Lewis Miley there and a couple of other players with no kind of real return date either. Matt Targett is one that you could argue might have been part of that match day squad, but they have up to 10 players out. One or two on this list could potentially be returning for the game this Saturday. But in terms of predicted lineups, who I expect to start, as always, you'll have to wait until Saturday morning. I normally post over on Twitter and on the community page on YouTube for me to give my predicted lineup. But let's have a look to see how SofaScore have it, and I'll give my opinion on whether I agree, disagree, and who I might swap in for some of the players suggested. Obviously, we've got the Newcastle lineup on the left-hand side. If there are any Newcastle fans watching, please do let me know if you feel as though this is the lineup that you guys will go with on the day. And anyone who watches Newcastle in general, just let me know down in the comments if this is a fairly accurate assessment of who may start for this fixture. Arsenal, on the other hand, we look at that front lineup there of Gabriel, Martinelli, Eddie Nketiah, Bukayo Saka. Can't really argue with that at all. Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard, again, very much expect both of them to start. I suppose where the debate comes in, that headache for Arteta, is away from home at an absolute madhouse, St. James's Park. Do you want to go with two defensive players? You know, free scoring Newcastle at the moment. You know, you want to be a little bit more defensively set up, maybe. Do you go with two defensively minded players? Arguably, you'd go with Partey if he was fit alongside Declan Rice, but we've got Jorginho there. Do you go with a more kind of attacking midfield in the sense of maybe Kai Havertz as that left eight, or Fabio Vieira? It's going to be a very physical game. Does that mean you don't want to bring Vieira in? Lots of question marks in midfield. And then we look at the back four / back five, if you want to include David Raya, who I fully expect to start. Gabriel, Saliba, Ben White, no questions there whatsoever. Tomiyasu, he's been in some really, really good form of late, really showing his value to this Arsenal side. Much better defensively. Will there be large parts of the game where Arsenal are out of possession? Do we need a more defensively minded fullback? He does invert well. He's much more physical than Zinchenko, but obviously there is little bits of that Arsenal side that you lose when Zinchenko isn't part of it. The way he breaks the line, his technical ability, his passing ability. Again, big headaches for Arteta. Again, let me know down in the comments below. How do you see Arsenal lining up for this huge fixture on Saturday evening? So that brings us to the back end of this video, where I will actually give a score prediction this week. I don't always give a score prediction, but I will put my neck on the line. I see it being a very tough, close game. I'm hoping that there is a response from this Arsenal side this Saturday off the back of that West Ham loss in the Carabao Cup. So I'm going to go for a very tough, nervy, tight back-to-back 2-1 Arsenal win. By no means do I think this is going to be an easy game. I'd like to think that Arsenal aren't going to lose. We only picked up our second loss of the season midweek, still unbeaten in the Premier League. And I would very much like to keep it that way if at all possible. So a 2-1 Arsenal win in my book. Let me know down in the comments below, alongside your predicted lineups, what do you think the Arsenal score will be? And if you do fancy getting involved in even more Arsenal talk, whether it's Arsenal transfers, Arsenal news, Arsenal match day talk, there will be a link to the Arsenal Analysed Discord down in the comments below. It's absolutely free, and it just means that you get to speak with more gooners about Arsenal more often. If you have enjoyed today's video, do go ahead and smash that like button. Subscribe if you're new around here. It really does help me out in achieving that next goal of 2,400 subscribers. I do hope you have enjoyed, and do keep an eye out for the tactical analysis after the game. Hopefully, fingers crossed, off the back of another Arsenal win. But for now, I'm JC, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe, take care, and come on, you Gunners.